Hello, listeners, and welcome to the latest episode of the AdQuick MAdvertising Podcast, a podcast that explores the intersection of content, creativity, technology, all of the things that you care about. Today, we have a special guest. We have Jason Keath. He is the co-founder of Social Fresh. He's also an author of a new book on creativity, which we're going to get into. He's also an artist and a teacher. Jason does a lot of things. Super interesting guy, and we're lucky to have him with us on the show today. Thank you, Jason. Welcome.
Yeah, I'm excited to chat today, Adam. Thanks for having me on.
And Jason, before we get into marketing and business things and creativity, you're personally an artist, are you not?
Yeah, so I went to art school, did a BFA in design and photography, although I much more enjoyed the kind of painting and sculptural aspects of the extra classes you get to take when you're in art school. And I used to work as a designer when I first got out of school, and quickly started my own agency. And, I still love having that skill set though, like being able to do my own design when I want to. I still do paint some, I still sculpt some. Wish I could do it more, but that's kind of our journey of life, never having enough time for those side projects.
Yeah, I really think there's something to that. It's like it's probably like 90% of really great people in our sector also have a creative outlet of some sort, or even just at one point in their life. And I find it really comes with the territory. Like if you're passionate about media and marketing and creating things for like a market audience, you tend to also get that itch to do something that's not necessarily for a commercial purpose. And I think it scratches something that's different than what we do during the day.
Yeah, and I mean, I think, and if you don't have that, I think you should invest in it, because I think that concept of having something that feels like play in your life. Sometimes your day job can be like, especially in advertising or marketing, your day job can feel a little bit like play. Sometimes it very much doesn't. But if you don't have that aspect of being able to like get into those flow states where you feel like, time slips away a little bit when you're working on something, I highly encourage people to find that, because it's an important practice of creativity. It's like creativity with no stakes or lower stakes. So that's kind of our practice, to be able to come up with good ideas on a regular basis.
Yeah, and I find great companies try to somehow bake that in to their teams. And it's kind of, there's like a spectrum of it where like some companies have like foosball tables in the office, which I never really cared about. But then others actually like will give team members like 20% time for projects, or maybe send them to events, or even like bring the team together. I know it's cliche to do team building, but not trust falls, to actually do some sort of creative project together. And I find that pretty valuable. I think like really great companies want to invest in that, just to make sure that they're kind of creating a creative environment, to create a space where people actually think about doing something that's not just the same thing that they're doing every day, right?
Yeah, I mean, I think if you're not giving employees, peers time to experiment and innovate and grow, if every hour that they spend on your dime, so to speak, is toward a active client deliverable, you're really not getting the best of a resource. If your resources aren't growing and improving, that's not good. So yeah, I think it's
So
important to allow people that time to really experiment and do things they aren't billing for. I mean, it's tough to find that balance, but it's important to improve.
So, Jason, let's take a step back, because I know you pretty well. I've followed you online and read your thoughts over the years. If you don't follow Jason on LinkedIn, definitely follow him. He always has great takes and commentary. But can you give a brief intro as to yourself? I think you founded Social Fresh 16 years ago, something like that. You've had a long story career in the marketing industry. I think everyone knows you, but for those who might not.
Yeah, I again, art major, went to work in the agency world, started my own agency, sold it, started Social Fresh in 2008. We were essentially the first social media conference, especially for business, which we focused on from day one. And we've hosted over 30 conferences since then. Social Fresh is also an agency, so we do a lot of research and strategy work. We do paid media, and I'm always looking for, to help people and to be in the discussion around what marketing innovation looks like, what creative innovation looks like. But most of our work is around marketing and helping, brands improve in different aspects. And the conference itself, probably used to be most of our business. Now the agency is most of our business. I still love hosting events. We help companies host their own events and improve them. But there's always something very fulfilling about putting on an in-person event, how it helps people, how it brings people together, the community building, the just, putting people on stage, elevating folks. I've always enjoyed that. And that's, I think, something we'll always do to some level or degree.
Yeah, I love events too. And I think that it's kind of important, especially for our type of work where, if we're building an online community or we're working on, ad operations or we're doing a new website or whatever, it tends to be a lot of that work is done, solo or part of project management software. And so I find getting not just the team together, but being present at industry events is super important. At AdQuick, we go to the OAAA events. We go to a lot of the different out-of-home events around the world. I actually want us to go into more of the social media and digital events because our software actually makes it as easy to run out-of-home ads as Facebook or Google ads. But I'm super bullish on, especially if you're younger in your career, get out there and meet people face to face, see that they are in fact real. And I think another benefit is people like yourself, Jason, are so accessible and like super kind to everyone. You agreed to come on our show. You didn't have to do that. So I think like for young people, especially, show up, get to know people. It's like really underrated.
I think going to events is one of the best network building things you can do early in your career. Like before I started Social Fresh, I was out going to as many conferences as I could. Even if I didn't have a ticket to a conference, I would show up and just try to network off site as much as possible. If I, didn't have the funds for a $3,000 ticket to like the big high end conferences. Right. And I think that networking building is always invaluable, but yeah, you form really strong relationships. A lot of my early clients were from meeting people at conferences. And there's people that do a lot of hiring from conferences. People can make your career moves just by attending the right conference and meeting the right people. So I think it is invaluable. Also, don't be afraid to ask for like discounted or free tickets to events. Like not everyone's going to say yes, but we often will do scholarships for people that are younger in their careers or in between jobs or, just can't afford. Like our tickets for our conference are typically going to average out at around $1,200. Most people, their employer is paying for that, but for some people that can't, we try to help them. So always look for opportunities that can kind of help you build your network.
Yeah, in 15 years in the marketing space, I've actually never had a manager say no when I ask, can I go to this event? They've always said yes, 100% of the time. So I'm sure there are companies that aren't as supportive, but like I've worked at, like 6 or 7 companies now, and I've never been told no. So like, I think like the overwhelming majority of the time, if you want to go to a cool industry event, your boss will say yes.
Yeah, just make a case. Like we need to be better at X. They have sessions on this topic.
Yeah.
TikTok, AI, whatever it is.
It's a pretty bearish sign if your company doesn't want to invest in your skills because that just benefits them in the long term. So Jason, I want to talk about your book. So Jason has a new book, The Case for More Bad Ideas. And so do you want to give like the 2-minute overview on the book and also why you wrote it?
Yeah, I think the background for this is I, have been a leader in maybe the social media space for a couple decades, and I was constantly getting asked to write a social media book, and I never did because I didn't want to write a book that would be out of date in like a year or two, which I'm sure there's some great evergreen social media books. I did not have that book kind of in my head, but what I did want to write a book. Like I love writing. I've just always been passionate about creativity. I've made a study of creativity as a topic for a couple of decades. I've looked at all the scientific research. I've examined, the creative process of my favorite kind of peers and people I aspire to be as creative as. And I just, wanted to really break down what I see is the biggest problem with creativity is we just don't teach creativity. Like I went to art school. I've worked at several agencies. Nobody ever taught me a creative process. I think the only creative process most people learn is like the old school group brainstorm meeting, which is like it's invented by the ad industry from the 30s. And it is a creative process. It's not a great creative process. It does work for some people, but it doesn't work for most. So I wanted to break down a book that just was very practical of, how to create your own personal creative process, how to come up with ideas more consistently for the average person. It's written with a lot of stories, personal anecdotes, industry stories, both marketing. Most of the stories are not marketing stories. And I did some interviews, did some original research, and yeah, it's a counterintuitive guide to creativity. The more bad ideas is kind of the core concept, how bad ideas can help your creative process because it is a shortcut. And I think a lot of the kind of tricks and interventions that you might use to add to your own creative process, they are counterintuitive. They are things that we wouldn't think of off the top of our head. So that's kind of the theme of the book.
Yeah, and I think this is a really important book right now because Jason, we have a lot of ad creatives on this show, and one of the most common things that we hear from them is they're frustrated by sort of the ad industry and probably the media industry overall feeling stuck. And so some examples of that are, infinite superhero sequels and reboots and remakes of old stories instead of new stories. And then on the ad side, everything, every Super Bowl ad kind of feels the same. Like it's like the same celebrities, the same playbooks. And it basically I think there's a quiet frustration among not just the people on this show, but overall that the media and the ad space feels stuck. And I feel like we have some glimpses of creativity now and again, like Oppenheimer or the Barbie movie is actually very creative. You might not like it, but I thought it was pretty well done. But anyway, I'm just curious. Do you think that this is something that is generational? Maybe we have I've heard there's a lot of risk averse people still holding the reins of the CMO role and whatnot, and the media exec roles, and we need some new blood. Is this sort of just a state of over optimization of creative industries where it's like we have to do the safe thing and the proven thing? Any thoughts, any reaction you want to have to this? Because we've had this discussion with a lot of people.
I think it's seasonal. I mean, I think I've seen these same discussions happen over decades. And, today, what looks like hiring a celebrity might be the very common partnership with Mr. Beast, right? Like that is every big brand in the world is doing a partnership with Mr. Beast. And it works because he does have such a huge audience and has impact on that audience. So I think there are always these safe strategies that work and that more conservative decision makers will rely on. I don't think there's anything wrong with that, but I do think if you want to stand out and be remembered, you do have to shake things up quite a bit. And I look to brands that are trying innovative. I mean, even I agree, out of home, there are a lot of brands that are doing kind of more creative stuff with out of home. And I think just doing out of home for some big brands now is a little bit more of a creative path with all the change in our industries. It's something that still works if you put some attention to it. I really liked what HubSpot has done in some of these directions. Like they did a partnership, I believe, with Morning Brew, where they got the founder of Morning Brew and some of their team to attend like the college football championship and wear HubSpot letters to try to get it on the screen. Like very scrappy, very creative. So yeah, I agree that like there are a lot of decisions being made in the marketing world that feel a bit stuck. But I think that's always the case. I think we always have kind of our darlings that we're afraid to kill. And I applaud the brands that are looking to innovate and taking chances. And I do think there are more things you can do than ever to be creative and to take chances with all the channels and all the partnerships that are available to people today.
Yeah, and one thing that I've been thinking about this topic a lot. I write on the sort of stuck culture that we feel, that a lot of people feel that we're in. But one thing that I've been championing lately is if I think back on my career to any of the really cool projects that got done, it was me sort of being this really loud activist internally and being like, this is a great idea. We got to do this. And sort of putting my reputation on the line and pushing it through. And ultimately, did they all work out? No, but that was when some of my best work was done. So I try and champion young people to, like, if you really believe in an idea, get support, push it through. And of course, all of the good ideas are going to get pushed back initially. People aren't going to understand it, especially if it's like catering to like a really niche audience that you research and you really understand them. And, your management team's like, wait, why would this make sense? You're like, no, this meme would make sense. Here's why. And once you push it through, I found that because so much else in our sector is risk averse, it's almost so easy when you get that really good idea through for it to work.
Yeah, I mean, you do have to champion your ideas, right? And sometimes that means like sitting on an idea or developing an idea, incubating an idea over a long period of time. Sometimes it means just making a better case with data or stories, or showing versus telling. One of the stories in my book is from Spotify. Their creative director, Alex Bubman, they had the famous out of home campaign of Thank You 2016, It's Been Weird, where they took a lot of personal data of Spotify customers and made very geolocal, hilarious billboards from it. That idea was initially presented by him to his creative team, and nobody liked it. They thought it was weird. So he like sat on it for a year for their big annual campaign that happens kind of in the holiday quarter. And he basically just did some examples of what the ads would look like. And once he showed people what the ads would look like and developed it a little more, people got it much more quickly and supported the idea. So you see that a lot. You see like Lin-Manuel Miranda, everybody thought Hamilton was a bad idea when he first started shopping that around. And obviously it's the most successful play of all time on Broadway. I think, it's not a permission slip to say every weird idea you have is going to be like going to go gangbusters, but it is I think reassuring to know that a lot of great things that have been put out into the world in the creative lens are not seen as a good idea initially. So keeping bad ideas around longer, starting with bad ideas in your creative process, these are things that kind of broaden the scope of what's possible, help us find a larger variety, more divergent thinking. But also sometimes those ideas with the right champion and the right person to kind of persuade and develop an idea, that's what's needed to really get things over the finish line.
Yeah, and I think Liquid Death is another example that I like to use because they're marketing the most commodity of commodities. It's water, and so if they can do really experimental, fun, envelope pushing things, like I think it shows if this works in water, like you can have a little more fun in some other things. Obviously not in something like medical devices, but for a lot of consumer companies, I think like even they become a bit too buttoned down. And I don't mean like trolling in Wendy's. I just mean like doing something that feels more real, that feels less like you're, this mega corporation that's sort of away from everyone and the separate entity, right? Like the cliche is humanizing your brand. I hate that word, but it's really what you're doing when you do creative that feels like it was made by a human and not by, 100 McKinsey consultants, right?
Yeah, I mean, we have two huge trends right now. We have AI that is like automation, personalization, very anti-human. And then you have the reaction trend, which is to make things more human. So podcasting and UGC and executive social and people getting out in front of the brand. I think both are important. I think they both interact in different ways. But the most interesting piece is like, you don't tell someone a story about how a chatbot like really solved your problem. That happens and that's worth investing in. But you do tell people a story about like the weird new shoe that the Crocs company came out with, right? So I think finding those human pieces, that's what marketers and advertisers are paid to do, is to find that strategy that really breaks through and connects. And it doesn't always have to be as weird as like, put like Liquid Death has a casket that's also a cooler, right? That's an amazing campaign, a big PR splash. Agreed, like medical device companies and pharma and finance can't do that. But like there's innovation everywhere. MasterCard is one of my favorite examples with their Sonic branding. Like when you check out at a point of sale, the MasterCard jingle like is there. If there's any way possible they can get their Sonic branding on a point of sale, they've done it. And they're even working with more point of sale companies to make sure they have speakers, right? Not only that, they've developed a haptic branding. So if you have a device muted or you're holding a device that processes a MasterCard transaction, you feel the vibration of their jingle. Like those are like very subtle brand investments, but really memorable and something that humans will connect with. And I think that that's a great example of, innovating both on the brand side and kind of in the physical space. So there's always this, I mean, even on pharma ads, there's more animated pharma ads today. There's more people finding weird ways to sell us more drugs. And I think, that's one hard place to innovate in, but they're finding ways.
I actually don't think there should be pharma ads on TV. I think it's
I'm
like
okay with that decision.
Like your doctor should tell you, and if they want to advertise online or whatever, it's fine. But I think like it's kind of weird to like always just be telling symptoms to older people. I think it's like one of the bad things that the ad sector does that we shouldn't do. So
yeah, I agree.
So Jason, and also you mentioned Crocs. I'm a huge fan of Crocs. And it's funny because they're a brand that like it's, I think for a while they were like outperforming like Google and Netflix. Like the stock was up like 1,000%. And it was really interesting because that was one where a lot of my marketer friends saw that trend catching on. And I have like Wall Street and investor friends who like would laugh at me when I said, hey, I think Crocs, because they were a public company, like I think they're a good investment. And so I think marketers can actually like find a lot of these things where the money guys don't get it and like the creative and trend guys do. So they're an interesting company.
I would watch the person who is currently the chief brand officer of Crocs, previously the CMO of Crocs, and in between that he was a CMO at Stanley, where the Stanley Cup has gone crazy viral. I would just watch whatever company that guy goes to, because he's clearly doing some things right on the product innovation and making products that go viral. But yeah, I mean, take risks. Like another great example while we're just talking about brands. I like the New York Times as a product innovation example. Like they are, the bastion of journalism, without getting political about it. Like they just are really great journalists, but also like 40 to 50% of their traffic is for cooking and for games, right? And they are creating more impressions and more product loyalty through something I don't think anyone else really invested in before them at that scale, and to that quality. So, look for new ways to connect.
Yeah. And so New York Times actually was one of my users when I was back on the Google Analytics team, and their data science team was shit hot. Like they were probably the only newsroom with a real, I'm sure there are others, but they were looking at, to your point, like what actually converts for them for users. And I think they wisely figured out, hey, like, food and games can subsidize our reporting and bring in this revenue stream. And so like politics aside, they actually ran it really well just from I don't even think it was politics. I think they just ran a great conversion flow. They ran great content and they figured out, this nice formula. So, Jason, you mentioned AI. We obviously have to talk about that. I think AI is going to be the topic du jour forever now. In a lot of ways, it marks like the final quote unquote innovation in a lot of spaces wherein, whether it's using AI to create B-roll for your ads, or whether it's to help brainstorm, lists of blog posts or ideas or whatnot. There's obviously like non-controversial uses where it's great, but then there's this other more controversial area where, hey, humans might not matter in the future for creative industries, or, we're going to lay off half of our marketing team. And I think like anything else, the real answer is somewhere in the middle. But in terms of where your users are right now, how have you felt in terms of AI and creativity? Is it a gift? Is it an existentially scary thing? What are you thinking at this time?
I think it's if we could blend those, I think it is an existentially scary gift in many ways. The trope of you need to be the one innovating on AI, or else, someone that is better at AI will take your job. I think that's a useful one. I think we are going to lose jobs. I think it is going to flip over a lot of standard things in the industry. I think design especially is in trouble. Copywriters are in trouble. But I think there are still opportunities for those skill sets, because AI is much better at creative execution than I thought it would be, and it keeps getting better. I've written a lot of creativity AI prompts based on concepts for my book, and I was very impressed at how good the results, how much better the results were. Like I will ask ChatGPT to brainstorm ideas with me, you know, as a thought partner, and I think that's useful. But the stuff you get back is typically kind of a roll of the dice. Like sometimes there's some real magic that happens there, and a lot of times it's just, you know, a lot of mid ideas, right? I've really kind of closed that gap with some prompts that I've used and been very impressed with some of the marketing use cases. But at the same time, I'm writing really detailed multi-page prompts to get there. Like that's a human participating with the AI in a way that the AI can't do on its own. The AI is also giving me a list of results. I have to be the creative director. I have to be the decision maker that actually makes, you know, the tastemaker that makes the decision of what's going to work. So I think that role is going to continue in a significant way. Even, you know, if you're getting AI to write your blog post, to write your social media post, to develop your meta ads, it can help in all of those. But if it's doing all of it, then it's not going to be great yet. And, you know, you see these amazing VO videos, and you can create a commercially valuable TV ad with AI video today, but it takes a really good video editor that knows how to do it, right? It takes someone that uses these tools and has the human touch. So when do we evolve to the AI that doesn't need the human in these creative tasks? I don't know. I hope that day doesn't come, but you know, in the meantime, all you can do is protect your career, protect your business. And I think the way to do that is to invest in your ability to work with these tools.
It's that's pretty much how I feel. So in terms of AI, one thing that I have been concerned with is, and there was just some research from Microsoft of all companies put out that basically AI was actually harming people's ability to have recall of like things that they just prompted they couldn't remember versus someone who wrote something could remember. And there's this concern basically on the part of AI kind of killing the creative muscle. And is that something you think about as a concern? Is it going to work itself out as people move past the goldfish and trial and error of these tools and realize their limitations? Is this something that keeps you up?
It doesn't keep me up. I think it's a worthy question. I think if you're using AI to do all of your writing, or if you're using AI to make, you know, all of your brainstorming steps, then you're not going to be great at that task in the future on your own. And when AI goes down, when there's an outage on the servers, you're kind of in trouble, right? So I think, you know, one thing I do, I write most of my content on my own. Like I will outline sometimes or improve outlines with AI. I will I get it too verbose sometimes with my writing. So I will run a sentence that I know I've really kind of overcomplicated through ChatGPT to help me kind of find some clarity or find options to simplify. But when I sit down and write, I write. And I think if writing is important to your career, or writing is important to you as a person, writing without AI is still an important task to focus on. And then even more than that, you know, AI is good at different styles of writing. You can get it really dialed into a style of writing. I think it's kind of a challenge to people to what can you do in your writing that AI is not that great at. So telling personal stories, creating data stories, finding those kind of hidden connection points with messaging. You know, AI is going to be good at some of that stuff, but I think it's a good challenge to try to invest in those human parts of the creative process to kind of outdo while we can.
Yeah, I personally find, because I'm a blogger as well, I find it existentially unsatisfying to output with AI. Like I can get it because I have, you know, thousands of posts, and so I've, you know, trained a model on my posts, but I still find if I do that, I have to spend as much time editing as I would writing. Like maybe it will get better at that, but it's like the analogy I really have is, would I want to send a robot to go to the gym for me? Because ultimately it's a similar process of fitness, right? But where I do find AI very useful is I'm not a photographer, right? And I'm not a visual designer. And I find AI gives me output I'm very happy with for images and visuals with posts, where it's like I almost feel bad because in a previous world I would find a Creative Commons image and reference back to that person. And in a lot of cases now, like where it's harder to find free use Creative Commons, and like Flickr's been made worse and it's like harder to find what I want. I find like the AI output is easier, it's good enough. And so I use AI for images with a lot of my content. And I don't know if my users care or can tell, but it works just the same. And so I think like the amount that you value that part of the work, I think if you don't value it as highly because it's not like the centerpiece, it's like just stock art going with it, then I think AI already is supplanting what would have been you would have to outsource to someone else, right?
Yeah, and I think it's, you have to decide how important is this creative task to what I want to be better at. If writing is thinking in a lot of ways, right? When you write an article, when you write any type of analytical or strategic thing, or book, you know, you really have to break down how you think about something better than you do. It's when you're explaining something to someone else, which is what writing is. You have to explain it better than you do it yourself. You have to get more concise. You have to back up your thinking. You have to make a case. Um, so, like, if you want to be a better thinker, then don't do all of your writing through AI. If you want to be better at kind of ad design or understanding what works in video or layout, you can't outsource all of that, because then you won't know why the decisions are being made. So you have to develop your own skill set while using these tools. It's a balance. It's not clear to me how it's going to work for every single kind of role. But I would be thinking about that, and I would try to come back to some type of first principle when you're making these decisions.
Yeah, and if you look at people at the really top of their game, like Christopher Nolan in Tenet crashed a physical 747 into a building, and he used CGI too, of course, but he could have done the whole scene in CGI, and he decided, you know what, this is more fun, or it's just unsatisfying to have it just on the computer. So if you have people at the absolute top of their game and able to make these decisions, and they're saying, well, I don't necessarily want to use all technology here, that really says a lot to what the future might look like. People voluntarily playing with giant jets on sets is just maybe it's just existentially more satisfying for creative people to do things with their hands, right?
Yeah, and I mean, I think both experiment with the digital tools, the AI tools, and experiment in real life. And both are important. Like, one of my concepts from the book, instead of like an aha moment, I call it a happy collision, because play is important. Like going out and brushing up against life, and having life experience, developing your skills. Like, these are essential to those moments. Like, if you're not leaving the house, and you're not talking to interesting people, and you're not even consuming new varied media, like if you're not bringing in new data points, new inputs, you're going to come up with fewer ideas, or less interesting ideas. And I think experimenting in both directions, both digital and real life, is kind of the key. Like, when we think about our next Social Fresh conference, the two kind of things I'm thinking about, we mentioned earlier, are these two trends of the AI and automation trend, and the kind of human antithesis to that. Like, what are the innovations in both those directions, and what are the discussions that leaders in marketing are having around that, and how can we help have better conversations around that? So I think both of those directions are very important to experiment, to play, and to kind of take risk in.
Yeah. And you mentioned, going out and having life experiences. And I previously had a Gen Z guest on the show, and we were talking about he was trying to say to young people, please, in your 20s, don't just be a hustle bro and, build an internet empire. He's like, go out, have experiences, travel, get into trouble. And he's like, a lot of my peers like don't get into trouble anymore. And I shared some of the stories of, my 20s, which were a little wild. And I think to myself, there's like an infinite well of stories that I have to draw upon because I had a bit of a crazy life. And I don't know that you would ever get to be like a really good creative and ad creative, media creative of any sort if you've never like pushed the boundaries of like what is okay to do, if you've never like, broken into an empty warehouse late at night and had a party, right? Never found out what like, seeing what customs are like in different places around the world. I'm not saying get in trouble internationally, but, maybe make some friends and go see the world. And, don't just be, don't just build your internet empire and never leave your laptop is basically what we were trying to tell young people. And don't just be a crypto trader and watch charts all day. I think you really do yourself a disservice and find yourself creatively stuck if you can't think outside of the internet world and you never get into the 3D real world.
Yeah, I like the Get in Trouble Internationally. That sounds like a good book you could write. There's something there. So I mean, the brushing up against life is my phrase for it. The guy who invented the rolling suitcase, he worked at a suitcase company, so he had that expertise to build on. But he was on vacation when he thought of the idea of putting wheels on a suitcase, which everybody has wheels on their suitcase now. And he was carrying like 4 heavy bags for his family by handles and under his arms. And so, he had this pain and this ask of the universe, and he was out in the world and saw a bunch of suitcases on a rolling dolly and put 2 and 2 together, right? It's traveling, meeting and talking to people that are different from you. I think those 2 things are some of the best kind of brushing up against life opportunities that you can find. And just generally like making sure you're introducing yourself to new things that are outside of your industry, your friend group, your homeostasis, whatever that is, the bubble that you're in, finding perspectives that are different from that.
Yeah, the luggage example is a good one. There's also, I think the company's name is Away. They make luggages with the battery to charge your phone built in. And when I saw that idea, I'm like, wait a minute, I've walked around with a backup battery for my phone for like a decade because I travel a lot. And I'm like, no, this idea is brilliant because normal people don't know that there's backup batteries. And so like to build it into a bag is like, oh wow, it probably like it sold a lot of them because people clearly didn't know you could just have a backup battery. So another guest I had on called that the yassification of things nerds do and just making it easier. And that was kind of like a fun description. But I guess just like the wheels on luggage thing, like think about the things, especially because we have a lot of nerd listeners who might aspire to create a company. Like think of the things that you do that you don't, that are kind of nerdy or kind of idiosyncratic, and like that could be a product. Like there could be something there or a service that you help others with. And I think for a lot of the big B2B SaaS firms are things that like IT nerds are probably doing for their company and like thinking, oh, everyone already knows to do this. And things like cloud storage, like IT nerds were already setting that up, and Box is like, oh, we can just make this easier and sell it into everyone. So there have to be at any given point, like hundreds, if not thousands of ideas for companies based on what you're doing. If you're like, a tech savvy person, that are just sitting there for you to think about and productize.
Yeah. I mean, half the things in my book are things that I was just already doing creatively, like in my personal creative process. And when I would talk about them or help other people with it, they were like, you need to write about this and share it with people. And I think everybody has that personal creative process. I mean, that's half of what we do for our clients too, is we know ways to do research and strategy and paid media that they just would never think of, because that's what we spend all day nerding out on. Yeah, I think that's fun. Anytime you can introduce someone to like technological change as well is just a very rewarding advance.
Well, Jason, it's been great talking to you. tell our listeners where they can connect with you, and we'll also put links in the description. But for people just listening, where should they go to say hi?
Yeah, my newsletter is probably the easiest way to connect with me anywhere, morebadideas.com. You can find more information on my book there. If you want to check out my creativity AI prompts that I've written, I give those away for free to anyone who signs up for the newsletter. And my LinkedIn is linked there as well. Feel free to reach out on LinkedIn. Love to meet new people on there. And, if you are ever interested in working with us in any way, interested in coming to our conference or what we do as an agency, reach out and say hello.
Awesome. Well, Jason, thank you for spending the time today. And for listeners, we will see you next week for a new episode.